The fear of the unknown is one of the most basic tenets of horror. To be honest, the term fear of the unknown is just a complicated way of describing fear itself. I mean, yeah, sure, it's pretty easy to predict what may happen when you see a Michael Myers-looking motherfucker walking towards you with a kitchen knife. It may feel as though there's not a lot of room for interpretation there, but there really is. Is he going to kill you quickly in typical Myers fashion, or is he going to draw it out and make you beg for him to get it over with? Where is he going to stab you? Is he even going to use the knife, or will he decide he would rather toss it to the side and suplex you? Is he even walking towards you, or are you merely in his way? Maybe the knife is fake, and it's just a guy in a costume. Maybe none of this is even real. Maybe this is all just a nightmare. Maybe it's just, I don't know, some weird hypothetical that goes on for way too long. Regardless, fear as an emotion is intrinsically linked to the fear of the unknown because they're more or less the same thing. You can absolutely predict what would most likely happen in that scenario, but you can't know for certain until it happens. Yeah, obviously you're afraid of the big fucker brandishing a knife, but to be more specific, you're really afraid of what he could do, or what he couldn't do. The odds are stacked in his favor, though. Jump scares often get a bad rap for feeling cheap or unfair, or for being inserted in place of maintaining a feeling of tension and suspense, and I feel like most of the time that opinion is pretty fair. Most horror films have a false jump scare or two within the first act, almost like a fourth wall breaking way of making sure the audience is paying attention and they aren't falling asleep, or reassuring the viewer, hey, it's gonna get scarier soon. This is just a taste of what's to come. Jump scares are most often the payoff to the more traditional application of the fear of the unknown, like a typical suspenseful scene in a horror film, where as soon as everything goes quiet, musical sting, jump scare, ooh, scary. The problem with them is how their existence isn't really justified in most circumstances, how easily they can be replaced with a different method of releasing suspense, or just be removed entirely so suspense is maintained. Obviously, yeah, it depends on so many different factors in the media any given jump scare appears in, like tone, authorial intent, plot relevance, etc. But sometimes a work of horror can be improved by shifting focus solely on creating and maintaining suspense through the fear of the unknown. So, blood oceans, am I right? You may or may not already know, or have at least heard of, Iron Lung before, given that a certain popular video game man played it last year.
Hello everybody, my name is Mark.
But just in case, Iron Lung is an indie horror game released in early 2022, developed by David, known for other recent releases like the boomer shooter Dusk, Squirrel Stapler? What the fuck? And various entries in multiple DreadX collections. Yeah, I'll do a fucking video or something like that on those one day, don't worry. If it seems like I'm glossing over a lot of details about the game's background, don't worry, I am. Plus, there's not really all that much information about the game to begin with. It's an experience that takes less than an hour to get through, but don't get me wrong, it's a fucking phenomenal experience. I'd still highly recommend checking out the developer's other works, and not just Iron Lung, even though I strongly encourage you to play the game for yourself before watching the rest of this video. It's only $6. All of my playthroughs have taken roughly around 45 minutes start to finish. Just trust me. The game has an opening exposition dump that explains everything way more concisely than I ever could, so I'll just let it do my job for me. What? I'm lazy, can't you tell? Decades ago, every known star and habitable planet vanished, leaving only those who were on space stations or starships. This event became known as the Quiet Rapture. With supplies dwindling and infrastructure crumbling, survivors are searching for any trace of natural resources in a universe of barren moons, lit by the ghost light of vanished stars. One such moon holds a strange anomaly: an ocean of blood. You are a convict, tasked with exploring this anomaly in a makeshift submarine nicknamed the Iron Lung. It was not designed for this depth, so you will be welded inside, and the forward window will be closed. There was no time for training. If successful, you earn your freedom.
Beginning at descent. Cruising depth in roughly 40 seconds. Stand by. I'm seeing some voltage irregularities in the instruments, so keep an eye out for sparks or flames or anything like that. Approaching maximum depth. The hole's feeling it, but it's still holding strong. Closing porthole shielding. We're starting to lose radio signal. You'll be at cruise depth soon, so refreshing and be careful. You're on your own. Good.
2 weeks ago, we conducted an exploration of Moon AT5 for the first time since the Quiet Rapture, leading to the discovery of a fourth blood ocean. A trench beneath the ocean's surface has several points of interest. Your task is to photograph these points of interest with the SM-13's forward camera. Photos must be taken within 2 units of the specified position and 10 degrees of the specified angle. You can also use the camera to help with navigation. Only photos taken at the specified points of interest will be saved. Since you can't navigate by sight, pay attention to your coordinates and consult the map. The proximity indicators next to the sub-controls will trigger if you're getting close to an obstacle. Good luck. As someone who's just a little too obsessed with game design theory, Iron Lung makes every synapse in my autistic brain light up with pretty colors. This cramped, barely functional submarine, this claustrophobic nightmare, this is all you get. You spend the entire game trapped in this floating coffin, constantly on edge and feeling like you're just one little bump away from the unimaginable weight and pressure of an ocean of blood collapsing on top of you. On the plus side, you'd be dead fairly quickly, but that's not really what makes it so terrifying. Right? Death in a video game is just a game over. Try again, dummy. In some extreme cases, it's a permanent detriment to the experience that you can't come back from, but most of the time, it's just a consequence of the player fucking up in some way. And it's the same way in Iron Lung. You got too close to a wall. You got too close to a wall again. You got too close to a wall for the 3rd time. I swear to God, these walls can smell fear. Death in horror games is typically treated in the same way, but with an added bonus. It's okay, I'm not going to do it. I'm not that It's a way to release tension and suspense, while also being a way for the game to tell the player that they fucked up. Theoretically, if a horror game lacked any scripted jump scares, a skilled enough player could play through it from start to finish without encountering any, as long as they avoided dying or getting caught or whatever else would trigger a game over. However, the frustration that usually accompanies a game over isn't something I ever felt while playing Iron Lung. It's used less as a way to release suspense and more as a brief reprieve from the strangling atmosphere of this authoritarian nightmare. If anything, you want to get a game over. You're desperate for any sort of relief from the constant dread and panic as you frantically try to find a way to extinguish a fire that started in the back, or anxiously wait for the photos you've taken to develop. The irony is that getting a game over is just as dread-inducing, as after a few deaths, it acts less of a reprieve and more of a way for the game to taunt you, as you're shoved right back into the sub, and forced to keep pushing forward. Oh, fuck, right, the gameplay. What I said earlier about the titular submarine being all you get? No, seriously, it's all you get. You can't see anything that's happening around you, so you're forced to navigate purely through a map of the local area and sets of coordinates. You can turn left and right and go forward and backward, but only one at a time, and painfully slowly at that. If you really want to see what's going on outside of the sub, you totally can. Sorry, I lied. It's just that your view is a little bit limited. This process of taking photos is just this perfect encapsulation of the fear of the unknown. You don't know what's out there, what could possibly be lurking in the blood around you, until you face your fear head-on and snap the picture yourself. And even then, you still have to wait for the photo to develop, I think? I don't know, it sounds like a printer, but it's a digital screen. Who cares? It's fucking scary. You'll hear the sound over and over and over again throughout your playthrough, and it somehow never stops being just as terrifying as it was the first time you heard it. If anything, it becomes even more terrifying. Terrifying-ier, or something. And you can't just avoid it either. You're forced to face what you're afraid of. You have to take photos. Besides, it's really the only thing you could do down there. What else are you gonna do? Just sit there and watch your oxygen meter deplete? Oh, actually, about that. So, spoiler alert, the oxygen meter is superfluous. You can take as much time as you need to explore the trench on AT5. But it's just another aspect of the game that's focused on pushing you to keep moving forward and face the terror head on. I mean, yeah, sure, you could just sit there and do nothing. The iron lung's oxygen supply only decreases once you've hit certain progression markers. But you wouldn't know that if you haven't already reached the ending. And even then, you would have had to have been paying close attention to when it decreases, and how long it had been between each moment it ticked down. Like I said, I'm obsessed with game design theory. I just love how it's as if every aspect of the game works in tandem to force you to keep moving forward. You have to meander your way to each point of interest and snap a photo at the right angle, because if you don't, you won't be making it out of there alive. Taking photos is the reason why they even sent you down into this blood ocean to begin with. Supposedly. I'm not going to really get into the lore. There's not much of it, but I just don't really think it adds a lot to the experience. It's a cool feature, don't get me wrong, and I like the way you have to input specific terms into this terminal in the back of the sub, but it honestly just answers questions that don't even need to be answered. The exposition at the beginning of the game and the note you find from a previous unlucky convict is enough for me personally. Like, I don't need to know what specific type of submarine the Iron Lung is, or what organization is responsible for the player character even being there in the first place. Again, it's cool if you're into that sort of thing. I just personally don't think the game needs any explanation other than what it already had to begin with. This terminal was added in an update. It just kind of flies in the face of the game's core conceit being the fear of the unknown when you add in an explanation for the unknown. You know, show don't tell. Sorry for the random tangent on creative integrity. Shameless plug for my analog horror video here. It's just this and one other thing that are really my only gripes with the game. More on that second one in a bit. This is not an expedition. It is an execution. When they put you in here, they don't want you to return. And even if you do, and even if they keep their promises, what freedom waits for you? A few dying ships and a sea of dead stars? If there is still hope, it lies beyond the veil. Hope in this void is as illusionary as the starlight. I will choose to breathe my last here at the bottom of an ocean, unseen, unheard, and uncontrolled. They will get their execution. I will get my freedom. As you're making your way through the trench and taking photos of increasingly more distressing anomalies, you'll start to encounter some of the lovely fauna native to AT5. It starts off with a strange face in the static of one of your photos that you could easily dismiss as just noise, and then a whole-ass whale skeleton, and then another skeleton. You hear roaring in the distance, and if you're someone like me, you immediately try to rationalize it as just something like, I don't know, tectonic plate activity or some shit. Anything to try to deny the fact that there's something lurking in the blood around you, always out of sight. Well, almost always out of sight. The further you progress, the more things start to go wrong. Blood leaking into the submarine, a fire starting at the back, your oxygen depleting further and further. More than once, you get sent off course by something hitting the sub. The anomalies get more and more, anomalous. Everything is going wrong, and you just have to keep going, or else you might not make it out of there alive. As you approach the final anomaly and set everything up for you to take one last photo, you aren't making it out of there alive. Okay, so that other thing I mentioned earlier, maybe like, I don't know how many minutes or seconds ago? Yeah, that. It's the ending. The ending sucks ass. My issue isn't even the fact that it's a JPEG that just suddenly appears at the back of the sub when you go to take the last photo, which, don't get me wrong, is really fucking bad. No, it's the fact that it's not even the thing that's been stalking you for the entire game. This fucker? The one that shows up barely visible in one of the photos you take early on? Why is this the big final scare? This goofy-looking motherfucker. They don't even look that scary. They just look like they're grumpy because he woke them up to go to school or some shit. I don't know. It would have been cool if you were able to take the last photo, and you can barely make out the same voice from the beginning of the game telling you to wait for them to retrieve you. You're forced to sit there for a few seconds while blood is still pouring in, until the power in the sub suddenly shuts off, and you're plunged into darkness. You hear the same roar in the distance you've been hearing for the entire game, but it sounds like it's right on top of you. A few more seconds of deafening silence pass, until it's cut abruptly by the sound of crushing metal and the torrent of blood rushing in, as the iron lung is ripped in half by the thing that's been hunting you ever since your floating grave descended into this ocean of blood. And then, like, it's a short cutscene and the thing fucking eats you or something, I don't know. Nah, it's fucking scary shit. The expedition ultimately raised more questions than answers. Satellite images showed pieces of the SM-13 scattered all over the bottom of the trench, as though it had been torn apart by some huge beast. The wreckage cannot be reached at this time. No photographs have been recovered. The stars shine pale as bones. The moon is a lifeless corpse. Its ocean a gaping wound. The universe, what's left of it, is dying. But somewhere in the void, there must be hope. Say what you will about the current state of the indie horror game scene, but among the flood of PSX-style Unity demos that make up the majority of itch.io's horror tag, Iron Lung is a breath of fresh air. No pun intended. There's only so many times you can play through a quote-unquote horror parody demo of a popular franchise, or a genuinely unique take on the typical horror game format that sadly only takes about 5 or 10 minutes to get through, before you just get tired of it. What was once something that grabbed my attention and made me excited for the direction the indie horror game scene was going has become something that just feels dull and done to death. That isn't to say that a game can't be made with that aesthetic. In fact, the point I'm making is the exact opposite. But just like with every scene, new becomes old, and the exceptional becomes what's expected. I feel like any kind of horror scene is especially susceptible to this compared to most others. But things just haven't really been the same for indie horror games since Sir Frederick Fazbear changed everything. You know what I'm talking about. Mascot horror. Bendy and the Ink Machine, Hello Neighbor, Baldi's Basics, Granny, Poppy's Playtime. Regardless of the quality of each of these games, with a few exceptions, they all fill the same role. Short, highly replayable, child-friendly horror experiences that become the best friend of every Let's Player with a late elementary to early high school child audience. And they usually have some deepest lore that explains why Bingus Skringus is actually the one who killed 47 children in the late 1980s or some shit. Iron Lung is proof that it doesn't really matter whether or not something has been done to death or is just riding the wave, following whatever the current trend is, barring some obvious exceptions. If you're worried about your creative work being unoriginal or too similar to something else, it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you do it well. And don't plagiarize, obviously. Iron Lung was easily one of the best horror games that I personally played last year. It was undeniably one of the best horror experiences to come out of 2022, and that's saying a lot. 2022 fucking sucked. It was a horror experience in and of itself. And if something as great as Iron Lung can be passed off as just another PSX-style horror Unity demo at a glance, then it's just like that tired old saying, looks can be deceiving.